Welcome to Office Hours, Week 2. Lance, Sexton, and Gracie.
Hey, she just about ate the mailman a few minutes ago, Bob.
Thank you very much for your questions during the week. We appreciate it. If you have any late questions, you can ask by sending an email to joseph@colemanreport.com, or we can go ahead and do it through the GoToWebinar interface. Put in the question there. We have 3 poll questions for you. Yes or no? They're anonymous, so don't get too concerned. Question number 1. Have you ever forgotten to get a loan authorization change request approved prior to the final disbursement of the loan? We're not tracking answers. We're not, let's see, what do I need to click on here? Joseph, there we go.
It's okay to say no.
82% of our audience has not had to do that.
Well, I just want to throw this nugget out, Bob. If you don't get your loan authorization change request approved prior to the final disbursement, there is nothing wrong with putting that loan authorization change request together and sending it to Fresno or Little Rock and getting it approved. And the reason this question came to mind this week, Bob, because we talked about loan authorization changes, but also I was doing a couple of file reviews and found loan authorization change requests that had never been presented, and our fix was to put one together, send it in, get it approved.
Question number 2, do you have a written SBA lending policy at your institution? Because we have some credit unions on the line. I think we have a non-bank lender on the line as well, so let's be a little bit more inclusive in our question. And we're going to go 73% yes, 27% no. Does that surprise you?
It does surprise me to an extent. I actually expected the no answers to be a higher number. For those who do not have an SBA lending policy, that's another one, Bob. The things that I'm working on right now are the things that sometimes pop up in the poll questions. I've got a bank that's been lending for 22 years in the SBA program, never had an SBA lending policy, and they have an on-site review coming up. So guess what they wanted me to help them with, Bob?
And from what I understand, the very first question out of the box when they walk in is, where's your review policy?
Well, 2 of the things they're going to ask right out of the box, Bob, are where's your SBA lending policy and how do you train your employees?
And there you go. I didn't know that was up there as well. Question number 3, have you ever, oh, speaking of training, for those of you who finished, do we have video? No, we don't have video. Never mind. I will show that later. Let's go. Poll question 3. Have you ever had a change in the use of proceeds request denied by SBA?
And Bob, that's another current issue for me. I actually have a loan that I'm working on with a participant bank. They had a pretty simple change in the use of proceeds, and it was declined.
I'm surprised. We have 20% have had that issue. I'm surprised.
What are the numbers on this one?
20% yes. 1 in 5.
Yeah, I'm not completely surprised. Now, I had worked, and as all of you know, I've been working SBA loans for quite a number of years, back since 1984. I've never had one decline, but in the past 30 days, Bob, I've had 2 that lenders got declined that I worked with them to get taken care of. So it was a big surprise.
This is what I'm trying to show you. This is the plaque we will be sending out to you when you complete the final exam. So that's, keep up the good work, everybody. I know that we've had some late signups this week. I'm glad that you joined Office Hours. Even if you fall behind, please feel free to log in every Friday at 2 o'clock. What are we talking? What was the takeaway for week 2, Lance? The SBA 7A loan authorization.
Before I go there, Bob, I just want to throw out to all of our participants, we appreciate and respect what you're doing so much. I was trying to talk Bob in a previous certification course into letting me use an electronic signature on the plaques. Bob did not feel like that was, felt like you were worthy of more, so there's a real ink signature on all of them.
That's absolutely.
The takeaway is the importance of the SBA loan authorization. I've said it time and time again, this is what dictates how you close the loan. It dictates how you service the loan. And if you get to a point of liquidation, it's going to dictate how you liquidate the loan. So the SBA loan authorization is critically important. And what I'd like everyone to take away is, when I ask the question about loan authorization changes, if you ever get to a point of an SBA on-site or off-site review, or you get to a point of a liquidation, it is critically important that things like use of proceeds match up with the disbursements match up with the use of proceeds in the authorization, and if they don't, that there's an approved authorization change request in the file that you presented to SBA. It's very important for the authorization plus any requested changes and approvals matches up with the information that's found in the loan file and matches up with how you close the loan and how you service the loan.
Lance, my analogy is the underwriter who prepares the authorization is the architect, and you, the closer, are the builder.
Absolutely. And again, the person who's crafting the authorization, in my view, Bob, being somebody that spends a lot of time working on servicing and liquidation, as well as origination of SBA loans, that authorization, whoever crafts that, is a very important person in the process.
Email question number 1. Do we need a 912 form on each borrower with 20% or more ownership? We currently collect the 1919 and only request the 912 when the borrower has answered yes to questions 1, 2, or 3 on the 1919.
Bob, they answered the question for me. The answer is no, you don't have to have a 912. That's a change that took place last year. On the 1919, if there's not a response that would dictate a 912, you don't have to have one.
I'll do it. And this, I think, is one of the cases you and I have a consistent theme. Is just because SBA has that bar, you can choose to go above and beyond that standard. I think in this case, I wouldn't collect them at all.
Yeah, if they've not been convicted of a felony or not on parole, if they answer those questions the right way, don't do a 912.
Does the borrower have to sign an acknowledgement that they have received the equal opportunity poster, or simply putting the EOP in each file sufficient?
Now, this is a really good question, Bob, and I bet nobody in the audience would have thought I would have gotten excited about this one. Most loan files I see, Bob, just have the poster in file. I think it would be an exceptional prudent lending practice to get initials and date on the equal opportunity poster from the borrower. I really do, because I don't know that SBA would ever question you, but if they did and you had initials or signature and a date, you're covered. I have always truly wondered, Bob, if SBA would ever ask the question in a review, did you give the poster to the borrower? And the only way you could prove that is with an acknowledgement, signature, and date. So I think it's a great question, and I would say that SBA does not indicate in the SOP that you have to, but I think it's a good prudent lending practice to either get initials, signature, and a date.
Question number 2, change of ownership. Can you please define a change of ownership? For example, if an existing business partner is buying out the other partners, is that considered a change of ownership? We have an established bed and breakfast which is being sold to a new unaffiliated borrower. Is that considered a change of ownership? And if you are purchasing assets of an existing established business, is that considered a change of ownership?
All three are a change of ownership in my view. An existing business partner buying out the other, it's not technically, and a lot of that depends on how much, when they say buying out, I assume that means the partner's going into a majority ownership position. And if you're using a new SBA loan to fund that, you need to consider it as a change in ownership. The B&B being sold to a new unaffiliated buyer, yes, change in ownership. What it's referring to is if there's an existing business that a new borrower is buying or taking controlling ownership in, and you're going to use an SBA loan to fund that, it's considered a change in ownership. So the answer in all three circumstances is yes, and the answer to whether you need to do the things in the 1920 related to change in ownership is also yes.
Lance, I've read some Inspector General reports where guarantees have been denied because SBA after the fact says, hey, that was really a change of ownership, and the bank did not indicate it as a change of ownership in order to do less paperwork. Is it fair to say, when in doubt, call it a change of ownership?
I think you make probably the best point of the day, Bob. When in doubt, go ahead and follow those procedures for change in ownership. It's kind of a gray area, and the
yes.
SOP is not as clear as it really needs to be. But these three circumstances presented in the question, I absolutely would do as a change in ownership.
You are not going to get a guarantee denied if you indicate it's a change of ownership and it was just a purchase of assets.
It never hurts to be careful in the SBA lending process.
Email question 3. There are a lot of options under the limited secured guarantee. What determines what option is used? Is the only option available for the collateral is the collateral recourse limitation? Why can't the other options be used, i.e. balance reduction limitation, principal reduction limitation, maximum liability limitation, or time limitation? Whew.
It's a tough question with even an equally long answer, Bob.
And I'm not going to read the answer. The answer's there.
Just to share with everyone, when you have a limited guarantee, you have several options. And the question says, what determines which option is used? Well, guess what? That's another one of those prudent lending situations. You as the participant bank, as the lending bank, will determine which option is presented. The most common one I see is a limited guarantee based on the percentage of the debt, but you can do it with a set dollar amount. When the total owed drops below a certain amount, the guarantee is released. You can do it for a minimum principal balance. Once the principal balance hits a certain amount, it can be released. You can do it for a specific, like I said, specific dollar amount. The most common one I see is number 4, Bob. They do a 10% guarantee or a 5% guarantee. You can also do it in time frame. You can limit the guarantee. It can be a full guarantee for the first 2 years or the first 3 years. The question about collateral, SBA didn't put a lot into the collateral limited guarantee when you limit the guarantee to a specific piece of collateral. And the reason, Bob, they didn't is under normal servicing, after the final disbursement, you can release collateral unilaterally. So essentially, there's no reason to put additional options there, because as a prudent lender, 2 years down the road, you decide you don't need that piece of collateral on that loan, you can release it unilaterally. So,
Lance, I have to confess, in my lending background, by the way, I haven't made a bad SBA loan in 20 years, for your information. But when I was in that role, I never did this option. When would you use this type of option?
Limited guarantees?
Yes.
You've got, let's say you have a financial partner. They're not the chief executive officer. They're not making the day-to-day operating and financial decisions, but they were brought on board because they have a great balance sheet. And they don't want to give a full unlimited guarantee for the life of the loan, so they request a limited guarantee. And that's the most common situation. Or there's one limited guarantee, for instance, related to real estate owned by a married couple, and you can limit the guarantee on the spouse, the non-active spouse, to just their ownership interest in that piece of collateral. So those are probably the most common when you have somebody that's a financial partner, not a true active member of the business.
Thank you. Question number 4, how detailed can we make our SBA authorization if we are a POP lender? Can we incorporate some of our institutional requirements? I love this question. Great question.
My answer is follow the authorization the way it's presented. I don't think you want to put any outside information into the authorization that don't already exist. Use the authorization wizard to create it, but I would hesitate from dragging new things into the authorization that are not normally a part of it. And the PLP lender question, Bob, I don't know if you read that.
I will to not do it PLP.
Your change in proceeds on a PLP loan, your authorization or your loan authorization changes on a PLP loan, those you can do unilaterally. And what you do when you disperse your PLP loan, at that point you send a copy of the loan authorization and all changes to the appropriate servicing center, whether it be Little Rock or Fresno. So the answer is no, you don't have to submit a change in the use of proceeds to NGPC if you're a PLP lender.
And we skipped over question number 2 on question number, subpart 2. When refinancing home equity lines of credit, do we or should we require to pay off and close out that credit line?
Now, I'm really curious about this question, refinancing a home equity line of credit. That's going to be something that's pretty difficult, Bob, to prove is eligible under the SBA loan program. So my response to that is don't refinance a home equity line of credit. Now, I know there's some circumstances, Bob, where it might come into place. Somebody may have used their home equity line of credit to buy equipment. But you better make sure you document, if I were a participant lender, and I got this question this week from a friend of mine who used to work for me when I was at Deloitte Touche, Bob. She heads up an SBA department, and a borrower was wanting to refinance home equity lines of credit as a part of a loan, and my answer is don't do it, because SBA is going to beat that to death if the loan ever defaults.
Yeah, and the onus is on you to prove that the original disbursement was for business purposes.
Now, Bob, I'm not saying that it is absolutely not eligible. I'm just saying in a majority of circumstances it would be, and you better have rock solid proof that the only thing the HELOC was used for is business purposes.
When the banking,
and yes, the answer is if you were able to refinance it, Bob, it needs to be shut down.
Okay, very good. When the bank engages an appraisal company, are we required to state that this is an SBA loan, or have the appraiser address the appraisal to both the lender and SBA?
Well, the appraisal needs to be addressed to the participant bank, you, the lending bank. It doesn't hurt to make them aware that it's an SBA loan, but that appraisal needs to come back addressed to you, the participant bank. And I know quite often people will get, maybe the borrower had a brand new appraisal done 30 days ago and they want to bring that forward. And my response to you is I'm not totally against you using the appraisal as long as you go back to the appraisal firm and pay them and get the appraisal readdressed and updated, but addressed to the bank.
And we have some late questions coming in to play Stump the Professor. The Form 722 is now part of Form SBA 1919. Are we still required to give the borrower the 722 form?
Yes.
2, is the Form 1050, the settlement statement, required for all SBA loans?
It's required on any 7A loan. On express loans, you can use your bank forms, but my recommendation is get the 1050 signed. It's another one of those prudent lending decisions. The SOP doesn't specifically state on an express loan that you have to, but it's not that difficult to just print it out and get it signed by the borrower.
I've seen this happen in the past where the lender, the closer, will get a number of 1050s signed in blank. Is that a best practice?
I don't think so, no.
Question number 3, regarding the SBA Form 147 and 148, can we use the bank note or must we use the SBA note? And when would we use the SBA note?
On a 7A loan that is done GP or even PLP, if the authorization states that you need to use the 147, the note, SBA note form 147, and the SBA guarantee forms 148, that's what you use. The exception to that is SBA express lenders. SBA express lenders can use their own internal bank note and can use their own internal bank guarantees and their own internal bank security agreement. So the answer is most times the answer is go to your authorization. If your authorization specifically lists required forms, and if it lists the 147 and 148, then you use that form.
A follow-up from last week on discussion of equity injection. It was stated that an equity injection is required, but in the SOP there is no specific equity injection requirement. Can you be more specific? The issue we are running into is a dentist wanting to buy a practice, but she is right out of school and has no funds available for equity injection. Therefore, the assumption is the lender is doing a 100% financing of the practice. So 2 questions: should the lender do it, and how do you document?
Well, equity injections are not required on 100% of SBA loans. That is a true statement. Now, is it a best practice to get an equity injection? Absolutely. On professional practices like dentists, attorneys, accountants, sometimes you see you know, a new doc that comes out and is going to establish a practice and they really don't have the cash money to make an equity injection. I would submit that loan GP. I'm not real sure I would consider PLP or Express. I would submit it GP and let SBA be the determining factor on whether or not there's an equity injection. The reason for that is I wouldn't want to do this PLP and get 4 years down the road and the dentist flies off to Costa Rica and doesn't come back and defaults on the loan, and SBA questions why you didn't get some sort of equity injection, asset injection on that SBA loan. So if you want to do one without it, submit it GP and let SBA make that determination.
And Lance, it's also perfectly permissible, i.e. prudent, that maybe we go and ask that dentist that, hey, maybe mommy or daddy should guarantee it, put a third on the house.
I think that's a perfect, Bob, you tied that back into one of the first questions. Beautiful job. Perfect example of the need for a limited guarantee.
Very good.
Mom and dad, cousin Bill, Uncle Tom comes in, Aunt Susan, they come in, they guarantee the loan for a certain amount. I see that in a lot of professional practice SBA loan underwriting where you've got a newly minted dentist or doc and they're starting a practice. They don't really have an equity injection, but you know, their mom has significant wealth and she provides a limited guarantee of $250,000, something to that effect. So absolutely.
Appreciate all the questions. Lance, tell us about week 3, SBA Form 1920, the lender's application for guarantee.
Well, I think the 1920 is something we're all becoming more comfortable with. Bob, I'm going to throw this statement out there for fun. I worked at SBA, so it's okay for me to occasionally make fun. I can't tell you how many times while I was at SBA that we would start a project, whether it be the rewriting of the servicing SOP and coming out with 5057 or an update to the 5010. We'd start it, and one of the key objectives would be to simplify. And 9 times out of 10, we'd end up with more pages, more information. The SBA Form 1920, every lender should send SBA a thank you note. It's one of the first times that SBA actually consolidated and reduced. The 1920 put together the Form 4, the 4I, the 1264, I mean 770, or not 770, but it put together about 6 or 7 different SBA forms all in one. So I say that the 1920 is a very important SBA lending form. It's critically important to understand it and how it should tie to the credit memo, and how it helps you to determine eligibility. So it's a great week for us to get good solid knowledge on how to take care of that 1920.
Well, very good. Joseph, do we have any more questions? Thank you very much, everyone. We respect your time. Everyone have a nice weekend. This concludes office hours. We'll see you next week. Thank you.